So in this video, we'll take a look at the updated version 2.0 asset package first-person exploration kit, and this is the demo that was made using the kit. In the demo, we'll show off all the features and interactions and things that are possible with the kit, along with some of the provided demo assets and so forth. So the first thing you'll notice is this main menu here. This is part of the new core game loop structure that ships as part of the kit. It includes the main menu here, as well as a game menu, which is extendable. So you can make your own menus and do whatever you want with that. And then from that menu, we can quit back to this main menu, then quit back to the desktop. So we'll click our new game button here. Notice the continue game button is grayed out because we don't currently have a save game to load. So I'll click new game and we'll get into the demo. The first type I want to look at is the pickup type. This ball here is an example of the most basic type of pickup. There's no putback location or anything like that. It's just a ball. You can throw it around and hold it in your hand and walk around. So I'll just throw that back over in the little box. So taking a look at this can of tasty soup, if I pick this up, I can look at the label details, and you can see I can spin it in any direction that I want. And it also has this putback hint. So this is a putback location that knows that a can of soup belongs there. So if I interact with that putback location, the can of soup goes back on the table. Now, you can also configure objects to rotate in different ways. So there's a horizontal lock, a vertical lock, and a full lock. So the horizontal lock only allows you to rotate objects left and right. Vertical lock, same thing, but up and down. And then full lock, this object actually has an audio diary attached to it, so I'll just skip that and go over that a little bit later. But if I pick up this object and I look at it and examine it, I'm moving my mouse, but the object isn't rotating at all because it's a 3D mesh, but it's only one-sided. So I've decided for this piece of paper that I won't allow the player to rotate it and look around all the different sides. So the other thing to note about pickup type objects and putback locations is that they can be decoupled. So this can of soup here has a putback location that's automatically generated. So I just check the box in the inspector and it automatically generates a putback location for that can of soup. But there are other objects like this roll of duct tape here. It's not on the table, but it says that I should go find it in the cabinet. So I'll open up the cabinet, and there's my roll of duct tape. Now I can put that back on the table. So now that's its home location where it's supposed to be, but the duct tape wasn't there to begin with. So I manually placed a putback location and specified that a roll of duct tape should go there. Similarly, this cardboard box on the ground looks out of place. There's this nice video gamey spinning purple glowy thing, so I'm finding the missing cardboard box, and when I put it back on the shelf, it sort of fires some events and does some happy things. So you can also configure putback events and also pickup events. So a more complex version of that would be this this idol here. So it's kind of a little spooky looking. There's some spikes on the ground, and if I pick up this idol, I triggered an event with a pickup event, and the player was trapped for a second and got a little scared, and then now the trap is open back up, and then when I put this thing back down, I just changed the text to give some background on what that idol was. So the next thing I want to talk about is attached notes and attached audio diaries. So these are passive interactions. They can only happen as a piggyback on existing interactions. So if I take a look at, say, this journal on the back of the toilet, it's a journal, but when I open it, I also retrieve an attached note. You'll see in the bottom center of the screen, there's a notification that'll let me know that there's a new note added. So I open the journal, I can see the journal pages. This one only has one page, so I can't flip back and forth, but I do have a new note. So if I close the journal and open my Notes tab in the menu, I have this new note explaining what I saw in the journal. So I can save that and be in a different level later on and then open up my Notes tab and reread that information. We also have another journal in this trash can here. It says on the wall that we need 2 hands to read this journal. So if I say pick up a glass here and have this in my hand, you'll see I have a red X for my reticle, and it says in brackets that I need both hands to read this. So I'll put the glass back. And when I open this one, I have an attached audio diary. So not only will I see the journal, but I'll also have some audio narration play.
Some letters or interactable objects may feel nicer with narration.
So I'll skip that journal or skip that audio diary and read the journal again. This one has a couple of pages I can flip back and forth, but there's no note context given, so if I open up my Notes tab, there isn't another note for that journal, but I do now have an example of journal narration that I can click on later,
Subletters or interact.
and I can play that journal back at any time. The old audio diary type is still in the kit, so you can have an activation or interaction that when you look at something or interact with something that an audio diary will play back, as well as this new attached audio diary that happens on top of other interactions. So it's best to just show you what I mean. So if I look out this window here, just by looking at this big pink cube, I'll play back an audio diary, and I'll skip it just for the sake of the demo.
Captain's log. Start date.
So I just looked at that object, and it played an audio diary. Same with this moon up here. It's really far away, but I just set the interaction distance to be several hundred units. So if I look at it, it'll also play a diary.
Captain's log. Start date.
So skipping that diary, if I look in my inventory or my menu, I look at my auto diaries list, I now have these two new diaries that I can play back at a later time. Now, I have one more example in the demo scene, and that requires manual playback. It's this little tape deck down here, and it also uses the new events that can be configured in the inspector so that when the diary stops playing, you can have some event happen. So we'll see what happens when I play this.
Sub-audio diary will self-destruct in 2 seconds.
So I made this particular audio diary require manual playback. So I had to hit the play button there. And then once it was done, it fired an event to destroy itself in sort of a spy movie sense. But now there's some smoke coming out of there. And the flavor text for the interaction says that I guess it self-destructed. So you also notice that I had to crouch to get underneath this little ledge to get at the tape. That's because the player controller now has crouching, jumping, and running, finally. So there's this little sticky note up here, which is something I can reach now that I can jump. So there's some basic dimensions that you can modify if you want to, but essentially, you can't crouch under really low ledges. You can crouch under somewhat low ledges like we did to get the tape deck. And you can't jump really high, so 3 meters is a bit too high, but 2 meters is just about right. So we can jump up, and we made it. So now there's a new note called player movement. So if I open my notes tab, it just lets you know that the player movement options, so running, jumping, crouching, those can be configured with checkboxes in the inspector. So if you want them or don't want them, just check the appropriate options and you're good to go. So this note here is an example of a static interaction. It doesn't do anything. There's no text even. It just, when I looked at it, I got a note added to my collection. So there's another example that has a note that does have some flavor text, and that's this painting here. So you'll notice the painting, though, doesn't highlight. So in the inspector, just unchecked the highlight on mouse over option. We have some text that just says it's a very lovely painting, and then we got a note that talks about the painting. So next we'll talk about the activate type. It's an interaction that when you press the interact button, some events can occur. So it's been modified for version 2.0 to include different event types. So there's a toggle type, a fire once type, and a fire every time type. So if we look at these radios, that one's very simple. It just plays the sound and stops it. This one's a little bit more complex. You see the radio knob animates, it turns on and off, and a light goes on and off. And then we also have this simple switch here that just turns on a light and plays a happy sound. So this is an every time activation, so we just hit the button and every time we do it, it does the same thing. Now there are more complex types of activations that you can configure. For example, if we walk over to this fan machine here, this is a special one that requires that we have a battery to operate. So if I turn this switch on, this is a toggle, but it checks if it has a battery. If it doesn't, then it gives us this little sort of error message. So I'll go ahead and turn that off. Now an example of a simple toggle that you can achieve without any code at all, just through the inspector, is this light switch here. So I turn that on, it turns on a light, changes some materials, and I can just turn it on and off. So this is good for like light switches or other simple interactions that you want to have in your game. And we also added a note explaining how toggles work. So back to this demo fan machine here. It requires a battery to work, but we have to find the battery first. So in order to do that, we need to look at the updated inventory type. So the inventory in the previous version of the kit was very basic and didn't have a lot of interesting stuff you could do. So that's been updated fully. You can now collect items, look at them in your inventory screen, and they behave very much like pickup items, except they have some extra flags and logic and things like that. So the key flags that you can configure, there's lots of other stuff, but the key ones are, can the item be consumed? Can it be held? Can it be dropped? And is it stackable? So here we have some examples with different options. First is this apple. So we can pick it up like a normal pickup type, but you'll see in the UI there's this new option to store the apple in inventory, so I'll press that key. Now if I open my items tab in the menu, I have this apple. So when I mouse over an inventory item, you can see on the right hand side I have a title, an image, and some descriptive text, which you can configure in the inspector. So I'll grab a couple more apples and then look at this puzzle ball here. So I can again pick this up like a normal pickup and put it in my inventory. And then when I mouse over that, same thing, it shows me the different description and image and so forth. And lastly, we have this collectible. So it's just a little kind of trophy thing. So we can look at it, we can put it back down like a normal pickup, but once we put it in our inventory, it says here that the player cannot hold, drop, or consume. So looking at the different options for the different objects, so our collectible, if we click on it, it'll show available actions. In this case, there are no available actions because we don't want the player to be able to get rid of it. But if we look at, say, the puzzle ball, we can hold it and we can drop it. So if I press hold, it goes back in my hand. So you can see it's back in my hand. Put it back in inventory and choose the drop option. That'll just sort of like toss it into the world. Put it back in inventory again. Now looking at the apples, they're a special type because they have this third option called consume. And that requires an inventory consumer. And what that is a little piece of code that can kind of do whatever you want that gets called when you consume an item. So in this case, we play kind of like a crunchy apple sound and then throw an apple core on the ground. So I'll show you how that works. So it sounds like I ate an apple. And then now when I go back in the game, I throw this gross apple core on the ground, and it's just another pickup prefab that I told my inventory consumer to throw on the ground. Finally, we have this battery type here. There actually aren't any batteries, but they are stackable. We have a hint here that says we need to check level 2 to find some batteries. So if we walk down this hallway here, we're going to go through what's called a doorway. This is new in version 2. It's essentially a portal that allows us to go from one scene or one level to another scene or level, and it saves our state when we leave. So we kind of take a mental note of what's going on here. We've got an apple core on the ground that's kind of rolling away, one apple on the shelf, and maybe let's turn on the fan and have this little air light blink. So we'll open this door, which is another new type in version 2, and walk through it. And then this little dashed sort of line on the wall and just indicates visually where the threshold is between the two levels. So looking back at level 1, it looks like we didn't really go anywhere, but we're actually in a different scene completely. So going back to level 1, going back to level 2, it's fairly seamless. So just these two levels are designed to look seamless. But now we're in level 2, which is a different scene. So walking into level 2, we see we have another door, but this door needs a key. So if I try to open it, it's locked. Can't open it. So I have this handy dandy hint and key right here on this green pedestal. So I will pick this key up and put it in my inventory, and then I will unlock the door. So nothing exciting behind the door, but I did get to unlock it, and that's pretty exciting. Next we have this table with some batteries. So the hint was true. Our batteries are in level 2, so I'm going to pick up a couple batteries, and I'll grab one more and put it in my hand, and I'm just going to throw it over here by the door, just to demonstrate how the level states are saved. So if I open my inventory again before I leave the level, look at my items tab, I have this ×2 on batteries, because remember they're stackable. So I have 2 of them, so I have a ×2, but they only take up 1 slot. So if I grab one and drop it, now I have a ×1, and then there's another battery in the world, so I'll put that back. So now I have 2 again. So I'll go back to level 1 briefly and then pop back to level 2 just to show you that the state got saved. So I'm in level 1, go back to level 2, there's my battery, my door's open, the key's gone, and the batteries are gone. So back to level 1, and we will put a battery in this little fan machine here and kind of complete this puzzle. So now that I have the batteries, I see I have two, I can put a battery in the little battery holder, and then when I turn the switch on, the fan will start to turn. So next we'll look at the new dock type. And a player dock is essentially configured with a couple of gizmos in the editor, but you define a place where the player will be located and a place where they will look, and then define some view bounds so you can restrict their view when they're docked. So looking at the most basic type, it's just a chair, so I can interact with this, and I sit down, I see got a new note there that explains how docks work. And also if I look left and right and up and down, I'm restricted to the bounds that I defined in the editor. So that just kind of, if you want to prevent the player from looking behind them or looking directly down or whatever, you can do that, no problem. So press the get up button, and I'm placed back in the world where I was prior to docking in the chair. Next, we'll look at a more complicated dock. This is an arcade machine minigame. So when I dock onto this thing, a couple of interesting things happen that are different than the chair. So docks have dock start, dock end, undock start, and undock end events that you can assign different things to happen in. So when I dock on this thing, the dock start event tells the arcade machine to start the minigame. So let's give it a try.
Welcome. Let's play.
So I'll try to beat the high score. So it looks like I did. See, my view is restricted. I can't look away from the play surface as defined in the inspector. And now that I'm done the game, I can play the game again if I want, or I can leave undock. But what I'll do is play the game again and then leave partway through and then demonstrate how the undock event gets passed to the arcade machine and it shuts down.
Welcome. Let's play. Goodbye.
So
Thanks for playing.
when I undocked from the arcade machine, that event fired and told the arcade machine to shut down and go back into a track mode. So next I want to look at event triggers. So event triggers are essentially box colliders with some other fancy stuff going on in the background that you can link scripted events together and also link triggers together. So in this case we have three triggers, and trigger A arms trigger B arms trigger C, and then trigger C plays a sound. So this is all done just in the inspector and like a small helper script to change the materials on the armed and not armed indicator. So there's screenshots of the inspector right on the wall there that you can look at how they were configured exactly in the editor. So I'll run through the sequence and then maybe explain some more stuff about it. So trigger A disarmed itself. You can see in the inspector here, disarm on activation. So I activated it. It armed B, so B is now armed. It played a sound and then disarmed itself. And B will do something similar, but it'll also add this little wall here. So I can't walk through it. And then trigger C just plays a sound. And you'll notice that C remained armed, so I can have repeating events as well. So if I press the reset button, the sequence will reset. And I got a new note explaining how event triggers work. So lastly, I want to talk about the save game system. So you saw earlier when we walked through the door here that the state of the level was saved when we left it. So that's an option on doorways. So this doorway here, we left it with a default of save state. So when I leave the level through that doorway, it saves the level state that I came from and then loads the next level. So the other way to save is through these save and load buttons in the system tab of the game menu. So if let's say I save my game, I'll be looking at this apple core over there, hit save, and then maybe I will turn off this light and, I don't know, put the apple core over here. And then if I load my game, I'm looking at the apple core and the light is still on as expected. So all the new types and all the existing types all work with the save load system automatically. And if you do something really fancy, say with a trigger, or you want to make a custom type or something like that, there's a little bit of work to do, but you can extend the savable types and extend the save manager by adding a couple lines of code, which is fully explained in the documentation. But you add a couple lines of code in the save load manager, add your own save type class, and then your new data type and your new save data will automatically be saved and loaded as part of the level saving and loading. And the existing old interactable items, so like this cabinet, let's say, and the toilet seat. So I'll save with the cabinet closed and the toilet seat up, And say if I change these and then load my game, cabinet's closed and the toilet seat's up. So the existing interactable items have been upgraded to also be compatible with the SaveLoad system, including this door here. So if I try to open the door, it's locked. Now I have this key card. I'll put it in my inventory and I'll unlock the door. And then maybe walk over here, hit save. And then if I load my game, the doors are still open and the door's unlocked. So that's the walkthrough for the new demo and the new feature set for First Person Exploration Kit version 2.0. If you have any questions or are curious about more details, take a look at the other YouTube videos on how you can go about creating your own interactions and custom things for your game. Details are available online. I'll post a link in the description below to the documentation. There's other videos so you can take a look at how you can go about customizing these things for your own game, as well as how the systems work at a deep level. So you can look at the technical details if you want at the documentation. If you have any questions or concerns, you're having trouble getting your game to work with the kit, email support@wildfun.com or message me on Twitter, whatever works, and I'll help you out. Thanks.